Welcome to the second of the mini lectures in 7505 NSC Project Management. In the previous lecture we defined what projects are and we spoke about the project life cycle, we spoke about the elements defined by the Project Management Book of Knowledge, and we spoke about the triple and actually the quadruple constraint as part of the fuller lecture, and of course we spoke about project management maturity. As part of what we covered, we mentioned the organisational context, the fact that projects bring people of all different persuasions together. And in this lecture, we're going to actually be talking about the organisational context, and we're going to be talking about strategy, structure and culture within projects themselves. And anyone who's ever worked in a project will find that when you go onto the project, there are certain things you pick up straight away. The fact that you've got a whole range of people working together who would normally work in separate areas of the organisation, such as the finance people, different engineering disciplines, the logistics people, the information technology people, human resources people. So this is important because when we have a project, very often we need to assemble our very best team together in an organisation. And what we'll see is that when this works, it generally defines project success, but sometimes it doesn't work, and what we want to do is find out why it doesn't work and how organisational context makes a difference. So we're going to be talking about the relation between projects and organisational strategy. We're going to be looking at all the possible stakeholders that we might have in a project and how they have to be managed. We're going to be explaining how the different structures operate, their advantages and disadvantages, and we're going to be describing the move towards heavyweight project organisations and their operation, particularly in the aviation industry. For example, if you've ever heard of Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, that's a heavyweight project organisation. What makes them so different? We'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at the concept of project management officers and explain how organisational cultures form and their impacts on project management. So, what is it about projects? We say that they reflect strategy. The firm's strategic development is a driving force behind project development. That is, firms are always looking in their strategic planning about how can we position ourselves so we can do our job much better. We can do it better in relation to our use of resources. We can do it better in terms of beating our competitors. But importantly, we can do it better in satisfying our customers. So we look at some examples. For example, if you actually had a project for constructing new plants or modernising facilities, that would probably be to satisfy the strategy to introduce technical or operating initiatives to decentralise plant operation. You might have to reverse engineer products as services. That is, you start off at the end point and work backwards. And very often that's to match or improve on a competitor's move. And this is what's done in the industry very often. You may have to re-engineer products as services. That's to meet the strategy, to come up with new products and processes. Same with creating new product lines, simply to change your strategic direction so that you're able to actually get an edge on your competitors. And for example, why did Boeing go for the 787, all carbon fibre composite aircraft with only a small amount of metal in it? Simply because they wanted to get the weight of the aircraft down and a number of other advantages to give them an edge over Airbus. And of course, Airbus was quickly behind them. Installing an enterprise IT system is simply to get all the different IT systems in the organisation talking to each other. And a project to negotiate with supply chain members is often to create a new strategic alliance. So projects are a way of executing change, as we saw in the first mini lecture, and that change is defined by a strategy. So what are the relationship and the strategic elements of an organisation? Well, first of all, we know that there is a mission. And very often that mission is then broken down into individual chosen objectives. And finally, to meet those objectives, we have the strategies, that is the how. And once we've picked our strategy, we then define goals, and then we come up with action plans as part of programs. And what we'll be covering in the course is going into this in greater depth and showing you the fact that projects are very often a change to bring about a change in the mission which is defined by the objectives flowing onto the strategies, goals and programs. The next thing, of course, that's important in a project are stakeholders. There are a whole range of stakeholders, and very often projects run off the rails simply because vital stakeholders haven't been consulted. For example, no one would build an airport these days without consulting the local community and doing an environmental impact study. And to commit yourself to such a large expenditure is going to cause problems. So stakeholders are all the individuals or groups who've got an active stake in the project, and they can potentially impact that project either positively or negatively in its development. And the sorts of stakeholders we're looking at, for example, within the company itself, the top management, the chief financial officer or accountant, other functional members such as the head of information technology, the head of engineering, the head of logistics, and of course the project team members. The next thing, of course, we look at is the external stakeholders. For example, these are the clients, that is the people who've commissioned a contractor to actually do the project itself. They can be competitors. For example, what a competitor is doing that we must make sure that our project eclipses theirs. Who are the suppliers who are going to provide valuable services for our project? And this is important in itself. And also, what are all the other environmental, political, consumer and other intervener groups? And these days, this is important, particularly in aviation and aerospace, where so many people are impacted upon projects that occur in aviation, simply because of the large number of people who get involved. So stakeholder management is an art in itself, and doing that is an important part of the course in not only identifying those, but finding out as to how we can make sure that we reduce any potential risks of getting these people offside. We want them to positively impact the project rather than negatively. Organisational structure itself. What does it do in terms of projects? Well, first of all, this shows all the different formal reporting relationships within the organisation itself. And projects are organised according to standard organisational principles. Defines the number of levels in the hierarchy, the span of control, and of course the big thing is that it can be divided up according to function, such as engineering and IT, product itself, such as Boeing 737, Boeing 777, Boeing 747, production lines, geography, for example, the 787 is produced at different plants in the United States on the East Coast and West Coast, and the actual type of project itself. And the big thing is that whichever way we organise, we've got to make sure we've got effective communication throughout our project and our key stakeholders, and coordination of activities across that fits in with the schedule, and an integrated effort by all the departments so that people are talking and working together. Projects that have failed, we often find, have failed simply because people don't talk to each other. People don't cooperate with each other. People don't coordinate. And we're going to be finding out how to do that. The thing is, what type of project organisational types do we have? Well, we've got a whole range going from the functional organisation to the matrix to the projectise or specific project organisation itself. And we're actually going to work through and look at all these different types of organisations and find out what are their advantages and what are their disadvantages. And for example, in the functional, we'll see that yes, it's a very simple organisation, but very often it becomes very stovepiped, and people simply often give more loyalty to the function than they do to the project itself, which is going to affect the future organisation. We have the matrix, and we talk about weak, balanced, strong, because matrix organisations mean that people in a project report not only to the project manager, but back to their functional heads. And then we have projectise, which is simply making sure our organisation is organised according to the different projects, so we maintain the skills right throughout. And of course, the advantages and disadvantages of these deal with the project manager's authority, being able to get the resources, being able to make sure that we've got the right budget management, making sure the project manager is supported right throughout their role, and there's the right amount of project administrative staff. And all of these different project types affect those different factors that I've just listed. And we'll be looking at those in different details. But in looking at them, we'll be taking a look and saying, well, how does the success really affect a project? And this simple graph simply shows, for example, on very low complexity projects versus high complexity projects. On the bottom scale, we take a look at the functional matrix going up to the project team itself. And we look at the percentage of success. And what we can see is that with low complexity projects, basically we get a certain degree of success, but it seems to drop off with the project team. And we'll look at why that happens. But with high complexity projects, going up to the project team itself ensures greater success. And we'll see how this comes about in the heavyweight project organisations. So we'll look at real world organisations and the ones that seem to have come up with the best way of organising in a way that suits them. And for example, a simple one is Air Services Australia organisation. This provides all of the different services in terms of air traffic control and so on to support Australia's commercial aviation. And what we find is within Air Services Australia, they have a projects group that's set up to execute their different projects, such as bringing in new communication services, bringing in new navigation aids, such as automatic dependent surveillance broadcasts. This projects group is constantly changing as they execute projects and bring on new projects and finish old projects. And we'll find out how that works. We'll take a look at Skunk Works and Lockheed Martin, the organisation that produced the stealth fighter and the SR-71 Blackbird reconnaissance aircraft that can fly at thousands of miles an hour. And we'll see as to how that project evolved and built up a proud tradition where today not only is it still ensuring that Lockheed Martin is coming up with innovation in aviation, but also innovation in other areas, such as in the nuclear power industry, as was reported in the paper in 2014. We'll look at project management offices, and these are the offices that are set up to oversee projects. And the one thing that we'll find out is they can be set up within the contractor organisation and within the customer organisation. And we'll define that project management offices are centralised units for overseeing and improving projects. And the big role that they really provide is they provide a centre of expertise in project management and ensure that not only are the skills built up, but those skills are sustained and in fact passed on to new people coming into projects. We'll look at organisational culture. And organisational culture is something we get in every organisation, but particularly in projects because they work under such intensive pressure. And we'll be seeing these are the unwritten rules of behaviours that shape and guide behaviour. And it's the DNA of an organisation, how it responds to changes in its internal and external environments. And what we'll be looking at, you'll be saying, well, what's the difference with a project organisation and any other organisation? Projects work under different pressures compared to any other organisation. They have their cost, schedule, performance and customer pressures that are coming all the time. And so therefore, they have to have certain cultures to be able to respond to the pressure of different stakeholders, to be able to react to problems that come up, the unforeseen problems. So culture is really important. And the one thing we know, culture affects the way in which people interact, the way in which employees commit to goals. For example, on projects, people are expected to often work very, very long hours under great pressure. It affects the way in which we plan. And in aviation and aerospace, planning is a big part of ensuring a successful project. And of course, finally, performance evaluation. So, in summary, we've described the relationship between projects and organisational strategy. We've identified all the possible stakeholders and how they need to be managed to make sure that they positively impact on a project. We've explained the different types of structures going from the functional, the different types of matrix, up to the project structure itself, and we've looked at heavyweight organisations, that is, project-specific organisations that really come up with the most innovative concepts that aviation and aerospace have ever seen. We'll be talking about the way that we have project officers to make sure that we provide centres of expertise for skills and projects, and we also discussed how project cultures particularly form and help guide a project towards its successful completion. Thank you.